Guess what, guys? It's new downhill bike day. This beautiful thing is the 2021 Canyon Sender CFR. In this video, you're going to get an overview of everything that's been updated, as well as my initial ride impressions. You've likely seen this thing underneath Troy Brosnan and Tawny Seagrave, maybe some prototypes floating around, and altogether, they've made one of Canyon's fastest bikes yet. Let's get into it. Canyon says the new Sender CFR was born from competition. Now, CFR, that stands for Canyon Factory Racing, so that obviously includes dudes like this guy and his teammate Mark Wallace. But Canyon is actually talking a little bit broader here, in that CFR relates to a new method of designing for Canyon that relies heavily on all of their best racers and their mechanics. The CFR program kicked off back in 2016 with Fabian Burrell helping them dial in their kinematics and geometry. Now they've cranked it up a few more notches. Canyon obviously wants to give their pros the best chance of winning, that's the goal here, so this bike has seen a ground-up change. First up, bigger wheels. This thing is a mullet in sizes small and medium, and comes with dual 29-inch wheels in large and XL. It's also an impressive 600 grams, so that's 1.3 pounds lighter than the previous frame. And this is the result of several changes. It has new carbon seat stays and chain stays. It also has a much more compact seat mast area, as well as reduced volume in the dropouts. The MX Link itself has been optimized, so it's a little bit smaller looking. That helps with the weight as well. And they've moved to a new lower shock mount on the down tube instead of the top tube, which also helps lower the center of gravity on the bike. The next big thing is revised geometry. Now, they went into this with a goal of updating it and creating a more balanced feel regardless of the settings. There's no more adjustable head angle, so it's fixed at 63 degrees now, but you can adjust the reach plus or minus 8 millimeters, so that's 16 millimeters of adjustment with these drop-in cups. The reach is also longer in general, with this size medium coming in at 452 to 468 millimeters. The chainstays have grown a little bit also, and they now feature a 10 millimeter short or long adjustment. This was previously pretty large, and it's now much more usable on the bike. So you're looking at 435 to 445 millimeters on a small medium, and 445 to 455 on a large XL. So this means that you can run a medium and long mode for a big fit or vice versa. Next up, we're looking at the suspension. You might recall seeing some prototype linkages under Canyon's racers the past few years. Part of that effort was to dial in the leverage curve a little bit, and that's now claimed to be more progressive. They've gone with a 250 by 75 millimeter metric shock size, and the bike is both air and coil shock compatible. The bigger update here, in my eyes, is a 60% reduction in pedal kickback. That's pretty huge. If you guys remember Project Disconnect, they used that experiment to gather data and find out what's ideal in what situation. On this bike, the main pivot is now lower and closer to the chainline as a result, and the bike has a slightly less rearward axle path. Quick note here, I know it says 27.5 and 29-inch on the shock linkage, but Canyon says you can't actually convert the bike between the two wheel sizes. The sizes have different rear triangles, so it'll throw off the geometry. The MX Link is just a shared component between all of their sizes, and Canyon's simply indicating what they feel is best. You could play with this to make it a bit more or less progressive though, which is pretty cool. Now, if you're a World Cup mechanic, you know a thing or two about maintaining and perfecting bikes, and the details on the new Sender CFR are pretty dang dialed. I really dig the replaceable threaded inserts on all of the pivots and on the front shock mount. Those are really cool, as well as the fact that it's super easy to access all of the pivot points, including the one that's hidden under the down tube guard, and I like the use of 8mm hardware. You won't see any more bushings on the bike. It's now all bearings, which is sweet. There's no rattle from the cables when you tug on them. Fantastic. The front end is also super tidy. All of the cables are the right length, which I really appreciate. The cable routing also looks super clean near the linkage. There's good protection throughout with chainstay and seat stay protection on tap. It's a little bit firm, but I think it'll last for you forever. And there's plenty of mud clearance. Before heading out to ride it, I threw it on the scales, and the complete bike with pedals weighed in at 35 pounds. That's pretty dang good. So how does this thing ride?
Nice. Great sport. Bottom out. Nice and controlled. The big compression.
For this video, I ran the bike with 30% sag in the middle reach adjustment setting, as well as the shorter chainstay.
To the moon!
Now, I'm 5 feet 10 inches tall, and I'm a big fan of the mullet setup. This allows me to still feel snappy around corners, and it gives me room to maneuver in the steeps. As far as the suspension feel, you can tell that this thing is super supple off the top. It has really good initial movement of that shock, which provides great traction and small bump compliance. There's a lot that you can push into in the middle portion of the suspension, which just yields to better control. If you need to do a last second hop or a slow speed yank, it's all good. Finally, it's got great bottom out support, and there's a lot of control when the bike is recovering from a big hit or a deep compression. I never really felt out of whack in those scenarios. I will say that the bike feels a bit less of a play bike than it used to, and way more business, but then again, hey, that's the point, right? They're going for a race bike. It would be possible to pull that reach back a bit and adjust the attitude of the bike for any given day though. I think that the spec here is on point. Everything worked really well for me. The code brakes kept my speed in check. The Maxxis tires hooked up very well with their max grip compound. And the overall impression of this bike was silent, solid, and smooth. This thing is incredibly well put together. It's super quiet. The only thing I really had to adjust was the bar width, and it had a slightly loose headset out of the box. No biggie. Now, you might also consider adding a volume spacer to the fork to better match the progressiveness of the rear. I think it'll help a little bit with balance there. And I did feel the rear end skitter when you're light over the top of bumps, gently braking while entering some turns. So not a lot to harp on though here. This bike rides really well. Like I mentioned, I rode it in the stock reach and chainstay settings. This bike does offer a ton of adjustment options to help you dial things in. And I think that added length could be really nice in those high speed scenarios. It's got the option to go longer in both reach and chainstays, which makes it incredibly versatile. Now, perhaps the raddest part, this bike is super well priced for what it offers. There's two models, one at $57.99 and the other at $46.99. I think that's a great value considering the spec and the attention to detail here. Right now, Canyon does not have plans to make an aluminum version of the Sender CFR, but they will continue to make the previous aluminum model for anybody that's looking for more of a budget-friendly option. Now, the Sender won the Best in Test award during our downhill test sessions a year ago, and the new version, I think, is a great improvement. In talking with Canyon, they strongly alluded to the fact that the technology and lessons learned from this bike will likely work their way through the line over time. If this bike sets the precedent for some of those shorter travel bikes, that's a very encouraging sign. All right, guys, that's a wrap on the new Canyon Sender CFR. It's pretty cool to see what happens when they combine professional rider feedback as well as their mechanics. This thing's a pretty dialed package. Be sure to hit up canyon.com and vitalmtb.com for more details. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button. We'll see you on the trails.